Okay, welcome everybody. In the name of University, I welcome you to this conference. I have to excuse my boss, the Vice Rector of Research, Innovation and Numerical Transformation, Antoine Geisbühler, who has had some private family matters that he had to attend to and couldn't come for the opening, so I'm doing the opening instead. My name is Laurent Miéville. I'm the head of the Technology Transfer Office Unitec, and I'm very happy to welcome today a colleague of Stanford University that I met when I was there doing my postdoc, and we kept in touch for a long time. And I'm looking forward to hear his story about the Google deal between Stanford and Google, and also more widely the discoveries with a lot of impact that came out from Stanford. And I will also showcase a few innovations that are coming from Unitec and University of Geneva, to also try to align also the impressive, probably, presentation that you will give, Luis. And then we will have a discussion afterwards about impact, and I will present at that time the guests. So let me present you Luis. So Luis Mejia has been a technology transfer professional at Stanford for over 30 years. He's a volunteer for Climate Donor, a nonprofit that helps fund climate change and species extinction mitigation projects. Prior to joining Stanford, he worked on solar energy systems and energy management at Honeywell and Pacific Gas and Electric, which is PG&E for those who lived in California. He has a degree in energy system engineering from Arizona State University. He's a fellow of the Disruptor Foundation, and he's a recipient of an award of excellence in technology transfer from the Department of Energy, Federal Laboratory Consortium. So please welcome Luis Mejia to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent, for a very, very nice and warm welcome. I'm going to get my glasses out here so I can see. Okay. I have my notes here I'm just going to read from to get started. So, bonsoir, everyone. As you might be able to tell, I'm not French speaking. That's about the extent of my French language. So bear with me as I speak in English. It's an extreme pleasure to be here in Geneva this evening to participate in this important conference. The topic of this conference, the importance of impact, is so critical to this moment in our lives that it is hard to fully grasp the scope of impacts required to address the totality of the challenges that we face. In fact, the challenges are so numerous and daunting that it is hard to know where to begin a conversation, particularly since the work of universities intersects in so many areas of the challenges we face. So I'm going to focus my remarks briefly on a few ideas, with my main objectives being the first, to talk about and celebrate a few of our successes. Secondly, I want to put a spotlight on some specific challenges, one of which may presents a very wicked problem. And lastly, I want to leave you with some thoughts for implementing solutions that could have an impact on those areas. While Laurent did mention that I may have a lot to talk about and tell you about Google, I probably won't be spending a lot of time talking about that, because that's a fairly long story, and I think I only have 20 minutes. And hopefully somebody is going to be telling me how much time I have left so I don't run over. But I certainly will touch on it a little bit. But I'm hoping that this presentation and this interaction, the dialogue we have tonight, from my perspective, is something I think can be, in my view, my interest is intended to be somewhat provocative. So we talk about a little bit about universities and knowledge transfer. But what I really want to talk about is these problems that we face as a society, as a species, and propose some ideas that may seem somewhat provocative, but I think, again, because of the challenges that we face, I think it's really important to have these kind of discussions. Okay. Okay, so to start off with the theme of impact, I want to start with a few initial thoughts. So what do universities do? And I mean, you guys all know what universities do. But the reason why I put this up here is because I often start my talks with our faculty and with our students about what we do. I think it's really important to talk about what our objectives are and to find sort of common themes of interest and have common plans for how we try to fulfill the university's mission, because we're all there to support the research and education mission of the universities. So that's what universities do, first and foremost. The second thing is knowledge transfer. I think it's fairly well known in the knowledge transfer community, the tech transfer community, and probably in governments, that the primary form of technology transfer and knowledge transfer is through the graduation of students. It's through academic publications. The more formal, if you will, newer type of knowledge transfer is really more recent compared to the many hundreds, in case of Oxford University, thousands of years of knowledge transfer. So that's a really important aspect of how universities are involved with creating an impact. More recently, there are these notions that are now typically referred to as translational research programs. Those have been around, maybe a decade, 15, maybe 20 years now. Technology acceleration, that's even more recent. And then entrepreneurship. One of the things I was really confounded by when I started at Stanford was they really didn't have any entrepreneurship programs. It may seem as a surprise to you who may look at the Silicon Valley, through what you read in the press or what you watch on TV, but the business school was there, and they really didn't interact that much with the rest of the university. And their graduates were primarily focused on going to work for Wall Street or going to work for an investment bank, not doing a startup company. So even that is something that's fairly recent. Economic development. This is something that universities never did, but indirectly, not directly, but indirectly. They indirectly did it through the graduating students who would go and work in businesses, pay taxes, make products, and so on and so forth. But now, more and more governments are looking to universities for economic development because they've seen the successes that universities have had with translational research, with startup companies, and with knowledge transfer. I don't know that universities are well suited for economic development per se, but we certainly can help be a contributor to that. And the last initial thought I wanted to start off with is that what we do, whether we're in a university or in the knowledge transfer community or you're in a business, what we do depends on the people that we have. And so it's really all about people. And that is one of the hallmarks of universities, is that the ability to bring people together, to have open discussions, to share ideas, and to talk to other people outside of the university. Initially, it wasn't even that long ago, there was the concept of ivory towers, where industry and university researchers didn't interact. And this is a whole other story I can get into, I won't, but Frederick Terman is a name that you may be familiar with. He's known as the grandfather or godfather of Silicon Valley. He was the one that gave Bill Hewlett and David Packard their first funding to start up HP. And so they didn't have a problem with universities at Stanford, researchers interacting with industry. In fact, there was the creation of the Stanford Research Park, which has been emulated around the world now, and is quite successful in terms of this type of engagement of bringing people together. Okay, so for the last 300 years or so, the main challenges facing societies were addressing diseases and improving basic living standards, conditions. We've never had to face the trifecta of challenges that you see here. By now, everyone knows about climate change, even though a lot of people don't admit it's a problem. Species extinction is something most people don't even think about, at least people outside of the academic community, even though it might be the most serious of all these problems. Humans have always had social and political challenges, but not too long ago, humans didn't even have social media. So to compound the challenges that we have in typical social, political arenas, we can add AI to that list now as a serious thing to consider. So these are existential challenges that we have never faced before. Okay, with that bit of a background, let me shift gears for a few minutes to talk about some very real impacts realized by a university, namely my university, Stanford University, since, as Laurent mentioned, I've been there for 30 years and I've seen a lot of inventions and I've lived a lot of the birth, if you will, of the inventions that were created in the labs and then moving those things towards commercialization. So the first one, I think this group probably is very familiar with, the recombinant DNA. It was co-invented by Stanley Cohen from Stanford University and Herbert Boyer from the University of California, San Francisco. This is actually a good, maybe a mixed segue here quickly, is a good segue to talk about the openness in research and collaborations, because Stan Cohen being at Stanford and Herb Boyer being at the University of California, they weren't working together on any particular research, but they happened to be at a conference and they started talking about ideas that they were working on. And that led to them collaborating jointly, inventing this concept of recombinant DNA or gene splicing. We call it within Stanford Cohen-Boyer DNA, but that's just because we wanted something that was fairly short and easy to say. So what was important about this technology is that I think it was an important part of launching the biotechnology revolution. In fact, the patent application that we filed was very controversial. Something like this had never gone through a patent office before. People said that we couldn't patent it because it was patenting life. We couldn't patent life. And there was a lot of negative press about our pursuing this. At the end of the day, we got the patent issue and the criticisms went away when they saw what was happening. At the end of the patent life, which expired in 1987, we had licensed over 450 companies. The one thing I want to really point out about this technology is that my former boss, the person who hired me, Nils Rammers, who created the Office of Technology Licensing in 1970, he saw this technology as being a very fundamental, very important technology that we could not give to just one company. So he had the vision to see that what was the right thing to do with this technology was to license it broadly and non-exclusively. And because of his vision and his implementation of the licensing strategy that we pursued, it became a very successful invention, not only for Stanford, but I think for the biotechnology industry in the world. The second story I want to talk about very quickly is based on a license called or technology called the backside contact solar cells. And this was the first high-efficiency solar cell that had been made in a laboratory in a university. And the inventor of this, Professor Dick Swanson, had been funded by the Department of Energy. And if some of you who were around back then, in the 1970s and 80s, there was a thing called the Arab oil embargo. And that was actually what got me interested in energy, was the fact that we were limited in supplies of petroleum, and we were told we were going to run out of energy, or we're going to run out of oil. So the federal government started funding basic research at that time under Jimmy Carter. And the DOE was spreading their bets like they do very, very well, and was funding research in solar energy. And this professor, he made his career out of doing research in solar and invented this very important backside contact solar cell. But then, early 1980s, Jimmy Carter loses his bid for the second term of presidency. Ronald Reagan took the office, and the funding for alternate energy research was cut off. And so Dick Swanson wanting to do solar research could not do research. So he thought, what am I going to do? Well, maybe I'll do a startup company. And you know, it's interesting looking at these in hindsight. It was great at the time. I said, oh, that's fantastic. You know, I'd studied solar at the university, and I think this is really great. You ought to really do this. But there was no market there. So today, this company would never get funded. Well, maybe it would now with climate change. But you know, go back 10, 15 years, it would never have gotten funded. So he got some funding, just enough funding to kind of get out of the gates. He left Stanford. You know, he put his professor robe, you know, in the closet and went off and started the company. And this is a real Cinderella story. They struggled. There was no market. So they tried to find anybody who would buy a solar cell, and there were very few people wanting to buy solar cells. He sold them for laboratories, for the space industry, for cars, like solar-powered cars that were mostly prototype cars back then. But they were running out of money fast, and they were thinking, okay, how do we survive? They were electrical engineers, so they said, okay, well, let's pivot. And they said, okay, well, forget solar cells, let's start making thyristors, which is another electrical component, something they could make very easily because they know how to do, and they could sell it. And so they started making that, but that wasn't even enough to keep things going. So they're about ready to call it a day, go bankrupt, and along comes this, a guy named, I'm blanking out his name now, T.J. Rogers, who was also a Stanford graduate, who started a very successful electronics company in Silicon Valley. He came along and said, hey, I hear you make solar cells. I have a winery up in the mountains. I want to put some solar panels up there. So I want to make it a green winery, which was very early days for that type of a thing to be even happening. And so he looked at the company and thought, yeah, I think this is probably going to be a good company someday. So they made an investment, they kept SunPower alive, and then off they went. SunPower then went on to invest hundreds of millions of dollars creating plants to produce mass-produced solar cells. Okay, then Google. So this is a real long story, which I know I don't have time to because I'm running over, I think, a little bit right now. But how many companies, how many startup companies do you know that the name is also a verb? I mean, that must be a first, right? And maybe it'll never happen again, but I mean, I think it goes to the whole notion how important Google has become. But very quickly on the Google story, I will tell you this, so Larry Page was a graduate student at the time in 1996, and he came into my office and he says, here's an invention disclosure. I want you to patent this and make me a lot of money. And I said, okay, well, we'll take a look at it, and we'll give it the old college try. And at that, it was 1996, and for those of you who remember back then, there wasn't much going on in the internet. The World Wide Web had just launched a couple of years earlier. Yahoo had just started as a business 1 year, I think, before that time. So very much in its infancy. The internet, to get on the internet, you had to use a 56 kilobyte modem. And if anybody who knows what that means it was really slow compared to what we have today. And so it was early days. There were a few search engine companies that were out there, and none of them were making any money. And so we said, okay, do we want to file a patent application on this? The market's not that big. The companies that are there are all losing money. And why would anybody want this idea? And Larry just said, well, it's because it's better than anything else. And I said, well, okay, I'll tell you what, let's go and we'll talk to the companies that are out there and hear what they have to say, get their feedback. And so we won this roadshow. So Larry, Sergey Brin, and I went on this roadshow around Silicon Valley. The existing companies at the time were Excite, Altavista, Yahoo, InfoSeek. And they all, at the end of these meetings, said, we're not interested. What we have is fine, right? And so then, after doing 6 months of this, we went back, and Larry and Sergey just said, oh, forget it. We're just going to do a startup company. And so I said, okay, great. If we don't have any licensees, I'll be happy to talk with you about doing a startup company. And here's another case similar to the previous case of an accidental entrepreneur. In fact, Gordon Moore, who founded Intel, had coined that term, accidental entrepreneur, because he was an accidental entrepreneur when he decided to leave Shockley Semiconductor to start Intel, whenever that was, for the years now. But So it's a very interesting concept from the standpoint of a university and a researcher and a student. Back in not that long ago, it's not something people really thought a lot about, but a lot of them were pushed into becoming entrepreneurs. And thankfully, I think to this day, we're lucky that a lot of them did. So, you know, when Larry came back and said, okay, we need an exclusive license, and I said, okay, you know, I think that makes sense. You guys know this technology better than anybody else, and, you know, nobody else is interested. But at least show me your business plan. And they said, well, we don't have one. I said, well, how am I supposed to know how to structure this deal if you don't have a business plan? And he said, well, you know, do the best you can. So, you know, I don't think anything like this had ever been done before, so we tried to structure the deal not based on what we normally would do, which would be net sales of some licensed product, but we just said, okay, well, give us some cash payments, and, you know, we'll just take a little bit of equity and, you know, and call it a day, call it a deal. And they said, okay, great. We signed the deal, and off they went. And so that's a Google story. I can go further detail later on if Laurent wants to ask any follow-on questions, but I'm sure I've already gone over more than I wanted to on that one. Okay, so moving on. So this is where things change. Those are all really great examples of things that have gone well, even though they weren't easy. But there are some downsides that I want to talk about, because this goes into the theme of what I want to talk to you about tonight, this provocative idea that I wanted to throw out. And so let's start with recombinant DNA. What is the downside? High price of drugs. There are many who feel that all of this basic research was funded by the federal government. So why should an individual need to spend $100,000 for a drug every year to get a life-saving drug that they need? And so that's an issue. And that's something that's tied into that will tie together with these other technologies and in general. In the backside, contact solar cells. I told you this great story about how SunPower was a success. It was a success until globalization happened. And all of a sudden, there was this race to the bottom. Everybody wanted to offshore manufacturing, and it all came about lowest cost products. And SunPower couldn't compete with China, who put in a lot of money into developing the solar industry and taking over the solar industry, and they did that. So SunPower didn't go bankrupt. They were acquired. They were acquired by Total, the oil company. So they're still out there. In fact, I put some SunPower cells, panels on my house. They're still out there, but the idea that this technology has become really difficult to sort of bring to the masses because of the loss of manufacturing in the United States, and I'm sure even here in Europe as well. And then lastly, Google. Google had a mantra that maybe many of you have heard before, none of you have heard before, and their mantra was, don't be evil. And does anybody know why they had that motto? Because of Microsoft. They viewed Microsoft as being evil, because Microsoft really was this giant that would try to put everybody out of business. They would create companies that were just on paper to try to convince investors not to start to invest in these startup companies. And so that was their mantra. And now I have to wonder, things have really changed at Google. Some of the things that they've done along with other social media companies is that they've designed their software to try to addict people to using their services. And then there's AI. Just recently, the head of development of AI at Google, I think it was like in the last week or two, left. And he's very concerned about what's happening with AI. This is another one of those cases where technology, it has its good sides and bad sides. And why do the bad sides? Why did sometimes these things sort of become issues? Okay, so this is where I want to go with all of this. I think that, let's see, 1 second. I think I might have skipped a slide. Here we go. Okay, so where I want to go with this is that I think it's time for enlightenment. Maybe, or maybe most of the wicked problems in our world today might be strongly correlated to our economic system. So on this slide, I want to suggest that if our current form of capitalism is the root of our existential crises, then maybe it's time to create an enlightened form of capitalism. To be self-reflective and on topic with the theme of university impacts, I include knowledge transfer here, my profession, but the problems with knowledge transfer too is a manifestation of our current form of capitalism. A big problem with capitalism is that the key metric for measuring growth, measuring economic health, is GDP growth, gross domestic product. The problem here is with growth. And for those of you who are, so many of you being in this bio building here, know the problem with cancer is that it just keeps growing, and it's growing unsustainably. And that's what we want to think about. How is this an issue, and how can we address it? So governments and companies are obsessed with growth, big problem. That's based on market value. And I think therein lies the blame for the crises that we face. So, back to this slide. Capitalism is unsustainable. Can those of you in the back see this? I'm sure it looks very small back there. I will try to look at this on this slide and read the numbers for you. But the first slide, the one on your left there, is a national GDP growth from 1950 to 2019 of 3 countries: China, India, and South Africa. China being the one that goes all the way up, India in the middle, and South Africa the one at the very bottom. On the right, greenhouse gas emissions. Again, showing 3 countries: China, India, and South Africa. So I think what hopefully this chart will start to show is a correlation with one of our existential crises and this idea of growth, currently measured by GDP. And then lastly, for illustration purposes, I want to show you this last slide here, which is the Living Planet Index, which measures the average decline in monitored wildlife populations. So the index value measures the change in abundance in 3,821 populations across 5,230 species relative to the year of 1970. So at the top at 100% relative to that starting point to today, in 2018, we could see that the decline in wildlife populations is about 60%. And this goes to one of the crises I mentioned in terms of species extinction. Okay, so we all realize that these are existential crises. Maybe not for us in this room, but maybe, your children or your children's children. But certainly sometime in this century, we are seeing some serious problems coming forward. So if the brief look at the 3 earlier slides I showed earlier provide a reasonably compelling case that in order to have an impact on our existential crises, then we must improve our capitalism model. The good news is that a lot of university research is going on right now that is focused on a more sustainable form of capitalism. But as I suggested earlier, the challenge here is a wicked problem because it's not going to be easy or fast to change the status quo. So briefly, there's a significant effort that is being shepherded by the United Nations to incorporate a new metric called gross ecological product, GEP. And what that does is it takes into account our natural capital in the world, our biosphere, basically. So we have scientists that are going around and modeling ecosystems all throughout the world and trying to come up with a value, the value to us as a species, the value to the rest of the species on the planet, and coming up with something that could be used as a form of economic health and progress, not necessarily growth. Okay, as with the movement to evolve mainstream economics, the knowledge transfer community, I think, can do the same thing. Because, as I said earlier, it is inextricably tied to the capitalist model we have right now, which is basically the gross domestic product of goods and services. Okay. Sorry, just getting reoriented here. Okay, so I just want to throw this out very quickly, and we can talk more about this, Laurent, during our conversation. But I wanted to just not leave you sort of hanging with like, okay, yeah, let's change the knowledge transfer system. But this is something I think we can immediately start to think about. So we can focus on sustainability everywhere: energy, high tech, water, agricultural industry, chemicals, and so on. But equally as important is focus on environmental justice and focus on social innovation. So those things have not been incorporated into gross domestic product economic progress metrics in the past, but I think they can and they should be. As far as implementation, and we have serial entrepreneur, or we can scale entrepreneurial programs to start thinking about this. One example is Patagonia. And many know that Patagonia's founder decided to, it's a public benefits corp, and he decided to put all the profits basically back into preservation of the ecosystems. And so it's possible, because we know Patagonia is a successful company, and so we know it can be done. So that's just one example. But it's more difficult than just saying that, you know, one company's done it, everybody can do it. But I think the universities are up for a challenge there. Ownership of IP, I think that's still going to be important, because in order for startup companies to get investments, I think they're still going to have IP protection. But the universities need to be responsible stewards, you know, for technologies, the technology transfer, knowledge transfer programs. So in conclusion, I believe that universities and their teachers and their researchers and their students and their knowledge transfer professionals are up for this challenge of this mission. It's in line with what universities do. And along with governments, NGOs, businesses, and everyday citizens, we have a fighting chance to address and adapt the challenges before us and to survive and live happily in a world that is still the most wonderful place of which we know in the universe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. I suggest we open up a lot of questions. I think we're going to address them after the 2 short films I want to show you with a few slides, and then we can discuss. I didn't see the slides of Luis, but you were very close to the title, Mission to Impact, because there's really a mission in your talk. So I think it's going to be interesting to exchange with the other panelists about that. But I think, yeah, you put a lot of... now I'm thinking a lot of, after what you said, about the responsibility not only as a citizen, but as a university member. And also, I know my university is pushing now with a new convention of objectives also in that direction. So I think we are aligned. But yeah, it's a very high kind of challenge that we have to all face. So yes, let's discuss later. So I just wanted to just give you, before I show you these 2 movies about 2 discoveries that were made in the last 15, 20 years that we felt in my team were kind of impactful, and also were giving some interesting examples of what technology transfer and universities could do when they partner with companies. So before I just mention that, just a very quick description of what Unitec, my team, is doing. As Luis, you said, we receive inventions from researchers, what we call that valorization. And basically we get almost, every week we get a new invention that is disclosed, and our job is to evaluate the possibility to find partners for that invention. We also do training, so we have actually an ongoing training session for researchers where we try to also educate researchers to look at what they do in the lab and to put it in context with the whole broader spectrum of innovation. And we also finance some of the development towards some could be discoveries that are not yet ready to be transferred. They need more kind of testing, and maybe a prototype has to be made, and this is also part of what we do. And finally, we organize event. We had last week an event in Lausanne with our colleagues from EPFL, University of Lausanne, CHUV, and HUG, where we actually showcase the technology that is just at the verge of being actually ready for being transferred. And so basically the event is a matchmaking event. Numbers, so I wanted to show, this is kind of the old school of technology transfer. You get all these numbers that tend to show a lot of patent, a lot of licenses. Also we get revenues, finance, money out of royalties, and also create spin-off. This is basically very kind of abstract, so I don't spend a lot of time on that. It's very important for some reason because university also rely on getting funds to support innovation. So basically having royalties going back to university, we can spend them to help researchers do more innovation. And also the last number, the 800 millions, that's for me one of the most higher impact. It's not money coming to university, but it's actually coming for companies that are created out of university technologies that are funded by investors. So it's basically jobs, equipment. It's part of, some of the companies are here actually. And this is for me also one of the impact that we feel is pretty high. And now just before I close and show you the two little videos, just to say if you are interested, we have our next course is on actually Thursday in 1 week, not this Thursday because it's a free day, it's a holiday, but in 1 week we have a course in the medical faculty, but it's open to everybody, where we can explain how to protect your ideas as researcher and collaborate with companies. That's the week after. And finally, that's on the 8th of June, so it's not the 8th of January, promote your invention. So we think it's not only our job to do it, but it's actually working together with the researchers. And if the researchers understand the issue, and some of them understand very well the issue, and they're actually very good in promoting their invention, we can be successful together. Okay, so maybe start with the two little videos. So I saw only one of the two, but I really liked it, so I'm looking forward to see the second one with you. And the first one is actually on physical science.
The company is founded in 1934. It was called radium chemistry. So this was the grandfather of the actual CEO. He realized that radium is at this time a very fascinating product. They realized that they can use it for the watch industry just to read the watches in the night. A new patent came out about the strontium aluminate, which shows a very strong afterglow. And then we were able to supply this material without any radioactivity anymore to the watch industry. And this is what we are doing still until now. Unitec is the main company here, and Luminova is the joint venture company between Nemoto and Unitec. The product for Luminova, it is a powder material, so it's pigment which is glowing in the dark. So the energy of the sunlight will be stored inside of the pigment, and then it will be emitted, or the energy goes out in the night. If you want to understand the physical processes behind the afterglow mechanism, you need very good equipment. And this is only available at the universities or at EMPA. We are a small company, so we are not able to do this development. We need the people at the university to help us to improve our product. So that's the impact of InnoSwiss is incredible.
Universities want to collaborate with industries. They want to be involved in practical subjects where the science can benefit those technical issues and problems.
This collaboration with industry is really essential for this project, because you're sure that you have really a minimum fluctuation of the performance due to the sample preparation, which you will never have in university lab.
Well, this project was interesting in the sense that there were two academic partners collaborating for the benefit of one company. And Geneva had a certain role in physical chemistry, EMPA had some other roles, and the two were synergistic, and it worked very well.
Hans Hagemann, he worked at the University of Geneva and he's an expert in this measurement. And then we asked him whether he would like to make a project with us, an InnoSwiss project, and he agreed.
I started to collaborate with Unitec for a first InnoSwiss research project, which was followed then by two others, the second one leading then to the patent, which we deposited together.
The researchers don't have any training in law, in business, in intellectual property. These are fields they don't know, so they really need help.
On one side, you have already 120% job doing research in the lab, and you add on legal harassments for making a patent and getting everything protected as it should be, because it's not only the lawyer, but then you have to explain to the lawyer what you are doing so that he writes a patent in order that the thing is protected correctly. And so this is a very complicated issue. So when Unitec came into life, it was a very good thing for us.
In this collaboration, as with other ones, our role in tech transfer is to formalize the research collaborations with the contract. So actually we write and we negotiate a contract which contains mainly intellectual property clauses, but also some other clauses, which essentially clarify how the relationship will take place during the research project and after in terms of legal aspects. These projects were repeated, so there was the first one, the second one, and the third one. So actually this demonstrates that the trust was established and that the stakeholders in this project wanted to continue working together, and the result is this beautiful material called Luminova X1 and all the versions that benefited from this research collaboration.
I think this is a good way just to bring the industry and the universities together, because companies are experts in selling a product or to bring something to the market. But the universities with their strong basic knowledge also give an impact to have finally a good product and to have an improvement. So I really loved these several years, these collaborations, because all of them, they are always completely in the project. They are always enthusiastic. All the postdocs, they are at each time, whenever you would like, so you can make a telephone call with them, and if I meet them on conferences, it's a real friendship. You are happy if you do something which helps anyone, just to read the watches or just to wear it, and that all your work you are doing is it has a reason why you're doing it.
On one side, it's very gratifying. On the other side, it's also very practical, because if I say to somebody in my village, I'm doing physical chemistry, for them, this is completely abstract. But if I say, I'm making the material which glows on your watch, they say, aha, this can be of some use.
So we had some development projects with other universities, and they made a comparative measurement with different products all over the world, and they said, yes, it's the best material you can have. It's quite nice.
Okay, I think we can get an applause for the first example. Now quickly we'll show you a second one in life science that also we felt was very impactful and also showed the very importance of partnership. And I think it's also, as it was shown here, it's university goes to a certain level, but then after we rely on people that are able to push this further. And so I will quickly show you the second example in life science.
We started developing antiviral vectors in the early 90s. We developed, derived from HIV, the AIDS virus, which we completely gutted off to make it a tool to introduce new genetic information into cells that need to be, broadly speaking, repaired. These cells then express this genetic information, and the daughters of these cells express it, and the daughter of these cells still express it. So this is what we exploited to repair cells in people that suffer from genetic defects. So typically, children, for instance, that are unable to eliminate some toxics because some of their blood cells are devoid of the gene that codes for a protein which normally eliminates the said toxics. And these children would typically develop neurodevelopmental problem because these toxins accumulate notably in the brain. These children start being able to eliminate this toxin, and then they're allowed to have normal development and a normal life. But for it to happen, we need to have the right partners that will support the basic research work.
But technology transfer offices are at the interface between research and industry. We provide the contractual framework to do the collaboration agreements, and we identify inventions, work with patent attorneys to protect them, and then license them to industrial partners. For example, wherein it costs like $1.2 billion to develop a drug and takes 10 years. So a pharma company wouldn't want to take a technology before it's really de-risked. And when we're in the university, we can only take it so far, because after that it becomes too applied and the researchers are no longer interested in developing it. And frankly, we don't have a mission to really develop products. This is where Clayton Foundation comes in, because they provide such funding that allows us to take technologies much further than we normally can, and they fund the research and take it to a stage where the pharma companies might actually get interested in them.
We had patented this technology and we're looking for a partner to carry out the clinical trials, since that's something the foundation does not do. And I remember we went to the pharma companies, we went to biotech companies, we went to the big venture capitalists, and they said, no, do not come to us with a gene therapy program. And this is where Didier Trono played a key role.
I mean, many people thought we were completely nuts to try to make medication out of virus that kill people. It seemed to be pretty out in left field. But we knew how the virus worked. We knew how we could exploit some of its features without taking any risk. And so we developed that.
So we said we will hold on to this technology and we'll find a partner. And then this happened when this little company called Bluebird Bio, a couple of years after we did a deal with them, they ended up going public, and at that point raised about $116 million. And this allowed them to engage in this very long and difficult process of carrying out the expensive gene therapy trials.
The clinical trials were encouraging, successful, and it finally made it to approval.
This product now is called Skyzona. Again, it is used to treat childhood cerebral adrenoleukodystrophy, and it just got approval by the FDA at the end of last year. And the first child who's outside of a clinical trial received this treatment in March.
We believed that what we were doing was right when we first invented or developed lentiviral vectors.
So I'm a strong believer that innovation comes largely out of universities and academia. And the reason is that it's very important to give researchers liberty and the ability to explore in areas, knowing that a lot of this exploration will lead to nowhere, but some of it will contribute in a very impactful way.
Some universities have set up platforms for drug discovery and development. Others rely on funding. We are also developing currently a technology maturation fund, which is quite modest, and we will try and invest in the development of these technologies.
It's important to have the universities involved, but universities cannot ultimately develop the drugs into products. It's a very, very long process to get there with very, very expensive clinical trials. And that's where we need to go to the private sector. We need industry to take on this rigorous drug development process and allow the research to become products.
I think the field of gene therapy is coming to age. I think now that there are examples of situations where it works, where it saves life, where it completely changes. You know, you have little kids that live in a bubble, and suddenly they can be next to the Christmas tree or playing football with their friends in the courtyard. that changes quite significantly.
This is also why this particular technology is so impactful, because it not only saved patients, more and more gene therapy technology will come out and be approved.
This type of gene delivery system, not just the one we sort of developed, but others, find their applications now in cancer, Parkinson, maybe one day in Alzheimer's disease.
This is the beginning of the real gene therapy revolution.
All right, so I will please call the panelists. So please, Luis, Christina, Tracy, and Antonio, please join me on the podium. So I can present you to the audience, and we can start the discussion about what was presented by Luis, but more generally, what is impact and what's the best way to move forward the technologies and in the marketplace. So have a seat. I will take a microphone. All right, so I will start a short, hopefully quick presentation of all panelists. So I will start maybe from the end there, Tracy. So Tracy Labs leads the VIS Center Development Strategy, Partnership, and Fundraising effort to accelerate the translation of science and technology to the patient. She's a champion for VIS Center Science and Technology and brings over 18 years of combined professional and research experience towards advancing innovative clinical solutions. She joined the VIS Center in 2015 after 8 years of building and running multidisciplinary programs at the Defense Advanced Research Project agency called DARPA, for those who went to the US. She holds a PhD in clinical neuroscience from Cambridge University. Next to her is Christina. And Christina Hertel, she joined University of Geneva very recently, December actually, as an assistant professor in entrepreneurship. She has worked for more than 10 years at the Technical University of Munich and EPFL, where she conducted research and taught hands-on entrepreneurship courses. Her work focuses mainly on how entrepreneurship can be used to tackle the great challenges of our time and how entrepreneurs can build responsible businesses. Based on this work, she has led the development of Levo, a methodology and online platform to assess and improve the operational sustainability and impact of businesses. Next to Christina is Luis, so I don't present you a second time. Probably I will skip now to Antonio, who is just next to me. And so Antonio Gambardella joined the FONGIT, which is the Fondation pour l'Innovation Technologique, Fondation Genevoise pour l'Innovation Technologique, in 2014. He was previously the founding partner of a venture capital fund investing in technology with headquarters in Switzerland, Italy, and California. During this time, he managed incubator activities for seed startups. Later, he made direct investment in innovative small-medium companies in Europe with active roles in management and board of directors. Antonio holds a degree in economics at Bocconi University in Milan. All right, so let me maybe start. There will be microphone. There is microphone ready for you at some point. We'll just start the discussion, but I think there are a lot of interesting aspects that were touched upon by Luis. And also, I think the panel has also probably some reaction to that. I will start with a few just around the panel to ask them what impact means for them. And, but in the meantime, please think about questions, because we will be very happy to have your questions also addressed to the panel. So maybe I'll start with you, Tracy, first. So you are the first to start. How do you feel about impact, and what's a bit your reaction of Luis' kind of controversial, as you mentioned, presentation, which I find controversial, but at some point also not so controversial, but we can discuss. So Tracy, please.
Thank you. My first reaction was, I'm not entirely sure how I could follow that up. But let me just say that coming from research, coming from academia to now working at a foundation that's mission is to provide clinical impact, I'll say. So we, at the VIS Center, we sort of bridge the gap between academia and industry. So we have a group of people who work to do the science and engineering, but also the legal, business, clinical quality, regulatory support that a lot of times projects need. And I think the fact that we have a very strong mission helps in our achievement of impact, I'll say. And our achievement of impact may be a little bit different than other types of organizations' achievement of impact. So we're not a university, we have a philanthropic funder who wants us to have clinical impact. So as you saw in the second video, the technology takes a very long time to develop. There may not be an enormous market. This is a place where an organization like the V Center can have a real impact. So that's my reaction to
thank you,
on
Tracy.
society. I don't know.
Maybe Christina, you are a young professor now at University of Geneva, and I know that it's very important for you to combine this sustainability, social kind of type of innovation in creating a startup. So I guess, what's your reaction to, what's your basically definition of impact?
So my very first, or like the very short version of my reaction is hooray, yay. So I was really, really happy about to hear what you said, because it ties nicely to what I wanted to share with you also today, because I agree that in the broadest sense, impact means, having an effect. So it's really like getting the things out, making sure that the things that are developed within the university are actually applied in the real world. But then nowadays, it has become much, much more. And we have to think about the fact that impact is not only cannot not only be economically speaking, but it can be like the social impact, the environmental impact. But then we also see that impact is not necessarily always positive. Impact can also be negative. Impact can be direct, impact can be indirect, impact can be intended and can be unintended. So if we want to ensure that the university really fosters innovation that is impactful, in the sense that it's hopefully positively impactful, we have to understand all these components of impact. And that makes our job much more complex, because it's not just anymore about, teaching students or then also researchers and other types of employees to develop these ideas and get them out, but also to understand the potential impact, the real potential impact, and to maximize the positive impact and minimize at the same time the negative impact. So I think for us it's getting much more complex, our job here.
Okay, thank you. Maybe later we'll describe a bit more what's your model that helps people to, when you start a business, you can try to measure and assess at certain point of the development of the business where you are on the scale of different type of impact, social and sustainable. So, Antonio, you like me a bit, and maybe Luis also, you have been there for quite some time, so did you see also this change? What's your feeling about, do you think what we showed here is something that is a bit exotic for you, or it's something that is coming up stronger in your practice?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'm the boring economist of the round table. So I'll try to give you a bit the sense of impact we have at the foundation. So the FONGIT is basically the Geneva Foundation for Tech Innovation. So we bridge invention, research, tech towards an impact on the market through entrepreneurship. So we foster entrepreneurs to create their own companies. And today we have quite a relative big number, because we help more than 150 projects representing 1,500 people. So I think we start to have a good sample of what entrepreneurs of today want. And the impact the foundation they represent is seeking is the one that actually the state, the Geneva state, provides me as a mission, in fact, which is both economic and social impact through creation of new companies and creation of new jobs. So the economy of tomorrow and the jobs of the future. That is, let's say, the easy part, so to say. Then there is your impact, which is, or your definition of impact, which is the one that we see more and more coming from all the entrepreneurs, which in fact, answer to your question, embed mostly already in their entrepreneurial DNA the intention of the impact you are seeking. But as you were saying, Christina, there is also the element of for example, what we start to see now is the net impact of the entrepreneur. Because you can have a lot of positive impacts, no matter what type of framework you use, SDGs or ESG, but then what type of negative impact they have on certain type of SDGs or ESG. So we're getting already at the next levels, if your question is not only embedded in the new entrepreneurs, but I think we're also getting more and more sophisticated.
Okay, at this point, before I give the word also to Luis, is there already questions or reaction to what was just said? I don't see too many. There is one hand over there, so Connie, if you saw that, please provide the microphone. Please stand up and just present yourself before asking the question.
Hello, my name's James Miners. I have a question to Luis. So since your raw material is research, and this should have a positive impact, are you implying that the state that funds this research should only fund those projects that have the potential for a positive impact? And secondly, no potential for negative impact, as in the case of Google that you mentioned? And if so, what does that mean for the funding of fundamental science, which should just be the creation of knowledge?
Yeah, no, I think actually it's quite the contrary. I'm a real believer in the success that the US government and other governments around the world have had through the funding of basic research. I mean, Stanford University has been known more as a basic research. In fact, it's known as a liberal research university, or a liberal college, in that it's unlike MIT, which is much more applied. There's a lot of just fundamental research going on there, and there really isn't any sort of top-down edicts about doing research that are more relevant for economic success. I think if you look at the history of universities, we're standing on the shoulders of researchers that have done some very basic research, over the last 100, 200 years. And, without that, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I think we're going to still need that. And I think it's really, I'm not an advocate of doing sort of targeted research for economic purposes. I like the idea of just doing what we do, where we have the researchers do what excites them. I mean, that's when you're going to have some results that are going to be impactful, is when they're really engaged in the research and their creativity is allowed to flourish, along with the graduate students, so the freedom to pursue what they want to do. So I think we need to keep doing that. I have seen a change over the years because of the need and the cost of doing research and education. A lot more pressure from governments, more local governments, about doing more. I mentioned it, economic development, but I haven't seen that get to a point where it's impacting how researchers actually conduct their research or how they decide to do their research. So I think we need to continue with that model. I think that having foundations who have similar purposes fund research is in alignment with what the goals of the university and mission of the university have been. Where it gets to be a little challenging is where you have corporate sponsorship. But Stanford has been very successful in accepting corporate sponsorship, but not having that sway or bias research results. And so the models that we've had, I think we should continue to do, which argues for governments to continue to fund basic research. And, the citizens support that too. And I think if the citizens sort of do see the benefits, that accrue, and I should point out too that maybe something that Laurent didn't mention that I think we all in the tech transfer community know, is that you need patience. Technology transfer, the development of new drugs takes a long time. And so, I think you can't rush it. You can't push it. You can't pick the winners and losers. And we never have really tried to do that. you know, even with the Google story, I mean, we funded that patent because we thought, okay, this is probably going to be something that could be important someday. We didn't know for sure, but we had a pretty good feeling that the internet was going to produce, you know, some interesting sort of economy in the future. But that was rolling dice. I mean, and we can do that. I mean, the venture capitalists, you know, can do that. And we act a lot like venture capitalists in the sense that we place a lot of bets, and hopefully some of them will materialize into some kind of commercial success. But certainly, we're not expecting all of them are going to do that. And we have to leave, you know, the commercial development and the risk-taking, you know, to the people that do that best.
Maybe just to follow on what you said, Luis, and maybe asking to Tracy, I mean, the second example shows, and Alexandra is just in the front here, she spoke about also Clayton Foundation. How do you see a comparison between Clayton Foundation, you know, taking also long effort and really to get to a stage where a technology that was in the beginning seen as very risky, nobody wanted to touch it, there was no clear indication it would be a success. So do you kind of relate to that in your day-to-day work, where you have to work for some time in some kind of, like a desert of trying to get to the stage where suddenly there is some interest?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the, if you go to our website, you know, one of the biggest projects that we've been developing over the past 5 years is an advanced brain-computer interface technology that enables people who are completely paralyzed to speak, to communicate again, or to move again. And I'm not sure if any of you follow the brain-computer interface field, and we've seen it sort of, you know, on the Gartner hype cycle be, you know, at the very top. Everybody's really excited. Elon Musk has invested in numerous, in one big company, but in sort of numerous approaches to brain-computer interface. And yet the key market, or sort of the killer app, is still not really understood. But for foundations like the Wyss Center, and for people like Hans-Jörg Wyss, who's very visionary and really wants to use his philanthropy to help maybe populations that are somewhat underserved, rare diseases, et cetera, this type of technology is super impactful. I mean, we had a patient in Germany who was able to communicate with his family for the first time after he was completely paralyzed and locked in. So he could ask his son to, you know, watch a movie with him, which is extremely moving. And I think that also goes to sort of your social impact. And I mean, economic impact is something that you have to think about when you take the technology out of a place like the Wyss Center. So you think about licensing it to a larger company, or maybe you think it won't make it as a startup, but, you know, having funders like Hans-Jörg, having foundations like the Clayton Foundation who are really dedicated to sort of bridge this gap, de-risk the technology, help provide time for the market to mature, I think that's super important.
In the meantime, other questions raising from the audience? Maybe just in the front there, Connie, where are you? Are you in the back? Just in the front.
Having bad hearing and poor English, maybe my question will be beside the point. The keynote speaker said at the onset, impact is greater when people work together, and that universities have been great example of collaboration. This may apply to science, or at least technology. It doesn't to art. And in art, we can even include Einstein and Champollion. So this is my first question. How do you react to that remark? The second one, maybe I didn't hear or follow correctly. I'm not sure what you are trying to convince us of. If you are trying to convince us that science can be useful, I have already heard that message occasionally in my life. If you try to convince us that science has more impact when coming outside the lab, it's also something which few people in the room would contradict. But can you mention some great discoveries or breakthrough in the lab which have not come outside the lab in the past 100 years.
I'm trying to translate. So the first question is art, people don't collaborate as well as universities, to your opinion. And you wanted us to comment about... Yeah. So I'm not sure this is really... I'm not an artist, so I cannot tell you. At least I know university can work very well together, so it's a nice place to collaborate. So I don't know, Luis, quickly about art.
Sure. Well, I'm not an artist. I enjoy art. I appreciate art, especially when I come to Europe. It is a great place to admire and appreciate the art. You know, I know it's difficult to be an artist, but I believe artists do it because they love it. They're not doing it for the money. And I do think that my recollection a little bit of my art history is that, I mean, there were these artist guilds, and a lot of artists did work together, collaborate, communicate. They probably consoled each other when they needed consolation. So I think people are involved in art in that way. So I mean, certainly it's an individual endeavor, but there's a community of artists, and I think they support each other. And I think there are people who, over the years, have supported artists to make sure that their artworks continue to come. On the other point about science impact, no, I'm not trying to convince anybody that science has been impactful. I mean, clearly it has. What I'm trying to convey here is more that we've got these existential crises, right? And it is more of an economics issue, I think, than a scientific issue, right? But we can't just ignore the economic world out there. We rely on it. And so that was really what I was trying to get at, is that we have to consider the economic system that we live in, and we need to think about how universities can try to change things so that the impacts are felt by more people in a positive way, and that we can deal with these existential crises, which are certainly could lead to no life in 100 years on this planet. So that was really all I was trying to convey there.
Just on what you mentioned in your talk, Luis, what's controversial can be seen from researcher is basically you ask them to be focused on certain elements that are very important for society. So people could say you are saying university is a basic research, kind of free mind research, but at the same time you are saying university should focus on this and that. And I know, Karl-Heinz, I see you there. You are a long-time entrepreneur and researcher. What do you think? Do you think, as a researcher as you are, do you think your motivation is also to address big problems of society, or it's really curiosity that is the main, or basically probably both? But I would hear from you, because you've been instrumental not only in research but also in studying many startups in Geneva. So, Karl-Heinz, if you...
Well, deep in my heart, I fully agree that we should focus on the most important challenges of our society. I don't have the slightest problem with that. Now I have to say I'm a poor medical doctor with some biological knowledge, and it will be difficult for me to go completely out of my comfort zone to come up with new innovation in a field that I don't know. So even if I accept that maybe medical innovation at this point is less important for humanity than some other innovations, I'm still happy to continue to work in this field.
Because thank you, Karl-Heinz. I think one of the issues that was mentioned is that, and you felt that in the video, the researcher, they were very happy to see they had an impact. There was something positive out of the research. And companies were recognizing and also the second thing is the empathy. And also maybe when you say arts and science and research, these are many people with a lot of empathy. And I'm not sure about Einstein. I read a book about his behavior with his wife. That's another story, but I was really shocked how bad and little empathy he had towards his first wife and kids. And so I realized my hero as a physicist was maybe a great scientist, but he also was kind of a very bad person behaving with other people. So, but that's another discussion. But now coming back to our kind of topic today, maybe Christina, I wanted to ask you, your tool, and you want to provide young entrepreneurs to have a better understanding about the impact in terms of sustainability and social kind of aspects. Do you think it's something that you feel they want to have, or some of them feel this is maybe added complexity to their already complex path to creating a startup and being successful? So what's your reaction? And maybe you can describe your Livo kind of model very quickly.
Yes, of course. I'm always very happy to talk about Livo, and I will take that chance in just a minute. But I quickly want to follow up also to what we just discussed, because I think, yes, of course, as a university, at least we should try that, we don't have negative impact. I think since we're also funded by public money, that should be at least, the red line we should not cross. But then, of course, not every scientist has to become a full missionary, doing everything he does, or she does, only to create positive impact. But then the thing is, different technologies, different inventions that we have can be applied in different ways. And that's also where we come into this equation, and where we can help them to understand in what different ways these ideas can be used in order to have different types of impact. You can have one technology that can be really applied to many different in many different ways, thereby having different types of impact. And I think that's really what is becoming more and more our role. And you see, this is all coming back to the topic of impact measurement, because if you can't measure it, you can't really change it, you can't manage it. So you have to understand this impact. And this is really why we developed this tool. And now, directly answering your question, yes, I think this is becoming much more important, and there's no way around that for entrepreneurs nowadays anymore. And I can say that with a lot of confidence, because I didn't develop that not only because I'm a researcher that is driven by a mission, but also I was approached by venture capitalists who asked me, please help me do this. And it was like a group of more than 100 venture capitalists that decided maybe we have a role in the society beyond just making some individuals and ourselves very rich. However, we don't know how to go about that. And that's where all this started. So now we have this tool that really allows you to understand the operational sustainability, that's more related to ESG, how the company is run, and then the actual impact of the product, the external impact, so how does the service and the solution that you provide affect society, the stakeholders, and the planet. And this really, for me, is the foundation of everything, because this helps you in the first step to understand the potential of your solution. And then you don't have to become perfect right away. You don't have to throw away your business model and say impact first, like societal impact first. But it allows you to understand the potential you have and the next steps you can take in order to improve this.
Back to you, thank you, Christina. Back to you, Antonio. You're also in connection with a lot of investors. That's basically part of your job, is to help company grow to a point where they get, attractive also for other investors. Do you feel also this kind of interest for investor for companies that bring this kind of social and sustainability equation? How do you see the evolution of your partner funding the future development of companies that you are helping creating?
Yeah, I see this, but fundamentally there is always the very little poetic view of investors. They are looking for one thing only, which is making money. Now, making money sometimes goes also hand in hand with the fact that there can be impactful, but not necessarily because they believe in, or very few believe in, because some investors of theirs, they believe it. So I think there is a real, and maybe, can I just steer for a moment the conversation, because we're going to be freestyle here, and it's not what I was expecting, but what you were saying was extremely interesting. I think this is a typical moment in our history of top-down decisions, and I'll give you an example. And I would try to take away for 1 second all life science related inventions, projects. Why? because it is easy to have life science contributing to a positive impact. There is also the sense of empathy that goes with, I mean, and I think it's fantastic, by the way. This is why we have such incredible foundations helping to bridge the gap from research to the real economy. So I think that's great. But let's talk for a moment about other things. And we can take very well the artificial intelligence as an example, because it's there. What did Larry Page told you when he came into your office? Say, I want to become rich. Help me to become rich. And this is the problem. Because everything starts from that fundamental issue, which to me needs to be addressed by real top decision makers, probably governmental, at different level. Government intervening actively into supporting specific technologies, such as artificial intelligence. The mistakes we are doing will cost us a lot, I think. We are letting artificial intelligence in the hands of private investors that are going to make money out of it, and so they will be with no mercy or no control on that technology, with all the big issues that you can imagine. So a state more, an entrepreneurial state in the Mazzucato view, you know, the Mariana Mazzucato view of a state which create the big technology, GPS, nuclear economy, and so on. So we're going to do the same mistakes with nuclear fusion, by the way. We're making the same mistake because nuclear fusion is in the hands of private. Okay? So, and then we have the government from an education standpoint. I'm absolutely with you. So it has to come from university. It has to come even sooner, because you learn to be a good citizen, a good ethical person from the very, very, very early stage of your school days. So this is, to me, the challenge. And again, it's not a question, it's more kind of a brainstorming, and I apologize for that if that was not what you were expecting. But I'd like to have your comment on that, because I mean, this is an issue here, you know, and just to say that we want to do more sustainable economy, in the end, you will always have knocking at your door a Larry Page 2, 3, 4 that says, I want to become rich. I don't want to be evil, but, you know, by the way, I want to become very rich. You see? And this is the fundamental alibi that we ourselves, our society creates and foster in our entrepreneurs, which is eventually the thing that is going to lead us to possibly even the auto-disruption thanks to the AI.
Go ahead, Luis.
So, yeah, I think that we can't predict, you know, how people are going to turn out. You know, when Larry Page came to me and talked to me, I knew he was a little bit too self-absorbed. But, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs are like that, and it works. You know, a lot of times you need to be self-absorbed to be, you know, a good entrepreneur, at least to get things out of the gate, and to be able to work, you know, 7 days a week in your garage, right? So we can't really know how people are going to turn out. I mean, take another example, Elizabeth Holmes, right? You know, look how she convinced a lot of people that she was going to do great for the world, right? And how she ended up turning out to really be. We can't control that. All I'm an advocate of is supporting, you know, the basic research and education mission of the university, using public funding and keeping what we've had, you know, for hundreds of years that has truly proven to be successful, and taking that same model, but changing the parameters, how things are viewed on the commercial side of things. Because universities need to think, too, about how things are going to be commercialized. In fact, Stanford has a policy that says that if one of our inventors wants to put their invention into the public domain, they can. We don't have to patent it. We don't have to think about making money on it. It's up to the researchers. So I think, you know, there's this, the goodness of, you know, the spirit of the university that is what needs to be maintained. We're not going to be able to prevent evil. It's just the way it is. But hopefully there'll be more good that's coming out of these, out of the laboratories that's commercialized, And we're just going to have to figure out from governmental regulation how to deal things with AI and fusion. And those are the things which will present, obviously, potential crises as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
Create jobs for ethicists.
Creating jobs for ethicists, yeah. We are getting slowly to the time for having a little apéro. If there are a very urgent last question in the audience, I'm happy to take it. Yeah, so go ahead before we close.
Thank you. My name is Daniele Gerondino. As a background, I'm a physicist. I've spent my career in the past as international organizations, and I've been teaching at the University of Geneva for more than 10 years in programs related to sustainability. There are a couple of things. But first of all, I was very pleased to see the accent that was given by the presenter about how he sees the issue of impact. And this is, I think, is a very important dimension that we should really follow. And I'm glad also that some things are developing at the University of Geneva in other ways. But my point I just want to mention is that a lot of things of criteria and way of thinking should be embedded in many of the disciplines that are taught at the universities. And when we talked about technology transfers, in a sense that there are many aspects, I mean, there are models in way you can define human well-beings. There are the serious issue of decoupling economic development from environmental impact. There are many criteria and things that are there. And even at the very practical level, you have methods like life cycle assessment and other tools that allow to have a very clear and detailed understanding of how maybe your products, your innovation are going to impact in various ways the environment and other things. And this should be a baggage I would say, that for the students and particularly those that come out and intend to become entrepreneur will have on their back. And this is also very important today, I would say, and will be ever more in relation, for example, to all the trends regarding sustainable finance. Yes, there is a lot of greenwashing and social washing in that, but the trend is very clear in how the investments are going to target, I would say, sustainability. And it is not the fact of what is going to be done, but the criteria and the set of thinking that you need to have in the area and in the things we are interested in, and how your innovation, the rollout of your technologies will be measured against this type of things. And things can go in very different way, and people may have very different motivations. I mean, young people that want, Tim Berners-Lee, who was the inventor of the World Wide Web, didn't want to get rich. He wanted to leave a footprint in what he was doing in research, and in fact, he did an enormous footprint, and same like many others. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this, I would say, or even concluding remark. I don't think, do you want to add anything on the panel on what's discussed? Maybe I suggest we close here the session. You are all invited to continue discussing just outside this auditorium with a little apéro like we do in Switzerland. I would like you to applaud and thank you the different panelists tonight. And I would like also to thank Luis, because Luis will be basically touring Europe a bit, because I know you go to a conference in Tallinn, but before you will be also in Italy. So I think it was nice having you here, and I think you expressed some issues that will be more and more important, that's for sure. I think nobody can really say it won't become more important. So I think it was good today to exchange a bit on that, but it's indeed a complex subject, but it's coming strong, and we look forward. Yeah, we look forward for Christina, your students in the future, to come to my office, and I will see also what you did to them and how they can include this in their business plan that they will show to us. So thank you very much. Enjoy your apéro and good night.